Now, is this microphone supposed to be pointing like down there? Doesn't matter, huh? Okay. Good. To be or not to be? That is the question. That's from Hamlet, you know, Shakespeare. Reflecting on the pains and unfairness of life, questioning his own existence. Shakespeare wrote a lot about that. I can't help but think of the disciples, kind of feeling the same thing about to be or not to be. Before the appearances of Jesus, they were questioning, what's it all about? Like in some ancient Shakespearean play, they're scared and they're hiding in the upper room where they had eaten the Last Supper with Jesus. But Jesus is dead. So now they met in secret and they're fearing arrest and they're listening to every footstep coming up the steps. They jump at every knock on the door. They probably have a secret knock, 3 knocks and a delay, then 2 knocks. I can picture Peter gazing out of the cracked window shutter, confused, contemplating his own mortality. Alas, poor Jesus! I knew him. Well, I thought I knew him. I thought we'd go on like this forever. But now he's gone. The tomb is empty. This isn't even his skull. I had to borrow this skull. Wherever he is, he took his skull with him. That particular evening, Thomas had pulled up his hoodie and put on his sunglasses and skipped out to get coffee for the group. Then Jesus, who is now up to speed on quantum physics and the movements of subatomical particles through different dimensions, stepped through the wall and said, "Peace be with you." Jesus showed them his hands and his side and gave the shocked disciples the Great Commission, which the church should never forget. "As the Father has sent me," he said, "so I send you." Then Jesus breathed on them, symbolizing the life-giving spirit that God gave to the creature Adam in creation. And then he disappeared before their eyes and was lingering, and the lingering silence was so thick and so tense, it beaded up on their arms and the back of their necks like holy dew. And about 30 seconds later, Thomas burst in with a tray of Starbucks coffees in his hands. "Okay, now who ordered the double sugar pumpkin spice?" he asks as he looks around. Nobody answered him. There they stood with their mouths open. Thomas sensed some kind of paranormal activity in the room. "We have seen the Lord," they shouted. Thomas said, "Oh, okay, look, you're strange, you're overwrought, you're tired. You probably just imagined it." No, we saw Jesus." Thomas gets angry. "No, this is Jesus. This is Jesus, Horatio. He's dead. And so are we." Thomas would have to wait another week before Jesus appeared to him. After which Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." That would be you and me, by the way. Have you ever considered how many different ideas about faith and religion and God exist among the human race? There are Hindus and Buddhists and Christians, one of my personal favorites, Confucianists and Muslims, Shiites and Sunnis, Shintoists and Baha'is and Rastafarians, one of my favorites in college, atheists, agnostics, humanists, deists, pantheists, New Agers, Old Agers, witches, wizards. There's a group online that they claim to believe in a flying spaghetti monster. No kidding. Certain followers of Jainism conceive of over 300,000 gods. And there are some Unitarians who believe there is at most one God. Among Christianity, there are thousands of denominations, thousands of spirit-led, pyramid-wearing, crystal-gazing Christians. And every one of them think they are right. Is faith being right? Christians will never know if they're wrong, and atheists will never know if they're right. Right? I mean, am I right or am I right? Here's the secret. Everybody has doubts. Sort of like Thomas, because we haven't seen. You have doubts, I'm sure. I have doubts. I've spent my life studying and thinking and reading and even teaching about God, and I try to walk the straight and narrow, and I love Jesus and I love his church, and yet there's a part of me, after I'm dead and the angels are singing and the roll is called up yonder and I'm there will be a part of me that will be surprised. Is it possible, maybe even rational, to have some doubts in the presence of faith? Because I have faith, and I've bet the farm on it. I mean, even Billy Graham, who was, when he was 90 years old, was asked if, when he died, he'd hear Jesus say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And Billy Graham paused and said, "I hope so," which reminds me of my favorite Billy Graham story that I've mentioned before, about when he arrived in a town and he's walking these unfamiliar streets, and he called over to some kid and said, "Can you tell me where the post office is?" And the kid said, "Well, you go down 2 blocks, you turn left, you can't miss it." And Billy said, "Thanks. Why don't you come to the crusade tonight and I can tell you how to get to heaven?" And the kid laughed, "Heaven? You don't even know how to get to the post office." I just love that story. There was an article in the New York Times about believing and doubting. And the writer pointed out that there are many different answers out there. But the thing we all share, what we all have in common in every honest religion, is the question, is the search. The questions: who is God? And where is God? To be or not to be? Is God the question? Is God the drawing, the desire, the presence that makes us search beyond what we can see? I mean, if God is not drawing our hearts to the mysteries, then why do we even think about it at all? If we religious people would stop arguing about our answers and rather start affirming and talking about our questions, then we'd all get along a lot better. And maybe we'd even learn something in the process. Now, when I've doubted something, I've worked hard to figure it out. I've questioned and I've searched, and eventually I've moved to a different place, a better place, and my faith has been strengthened. Tennyson said, "There is more faith in honest doubt than in half our creeds." This has especially become true in loss. Anyone who has suffered the loss of a loved one knows how permanent and irreversible it can seem. It was a real shock, for example, when my sister died about 10 years ago. It was one of those here today, gone tomorrow things. She had a brain aneurysm and she was gone. It's easy to believe when things are going well, but at a time of loss and confusion like that, it wasn't so easy. It's kind of like the disciples who are walking around Galilee, and they're preaching and they're healing and they're eating pomegranates and being with Jesus all day long. But now that Jesus is gone, it wasn't so easy. Thomas felt alone, for example. Things aren't so peachy, or should I say pomegranate-y. He feels threatened. He feels his loss. He has trouble believing anything. And that is grief. Many of you know, and some are still grieving for someone. Maybe it's the loss of a job or a broken relationship or an unanswered prayer or a chronic illness. Which takes us back to Hamlet and his reflection on life. In your struggles, let doubt do its work. Don't give up. Embrace the question. Don't be like poor Yorick here, unseeing and empty-headed, and also a poor conversationalist too. Work it out. Allow God to enlighten the eyes of your faith. Jesus will do his part if you come to him. He will whisper to your soul what you need to hear. Your part, the only thing he asks of you is this: believe. Believe in him. Believe that he is there in your question. Now, I want to end with a real short story that illustrates this, about a woman named Cheryl who was having her hair done. She and her beautician were having a good conversation about many things, and eventually the question of God came up. The beautician said, "I don't believe God exists." "Why do you say that?" Cheryl asked. "Well, if God exists, why is there so much suffering and hatred and violence in the world? I can't believe a loving God would allow these things." Well, Cheryl didn't answer. She didn't want to start an argument. When she left the salon, she went out the door, and then she saw this woman in the street with long, stringy, dirty hair pushing a shopping cart. She looked filthy and unkempt. Cheryl turned and entered the beauty shop again and said to the beautician, "You know what? Beauticians don't exist." "How can you say that?" she replied. "I'm here. I just worked on you. I exist." "No, because if you did, there would be no people with dirty, long, stringy hair like that woman outside," Cheryl said. "No," the beautician answered, "I do exist. The problem is she doesn't come in to see me." And Cheryl said, "Exactly. Exactly. Come to me, all who are burdened," Jesus said, "and you will find me. And you will find yourself." Amen.